Hey everyone, it's Jackie from Vegan Yack Attack, and I'm back with a brand new recipe for you. This week we're going to have some sourdough flatbread on the grill. Delicious! I do have to apologize for not making a video last week. I found out on Friday that my dear dog Bandit, our family dog, crossed the Rainbow Bridge and was pretty distraught, as you can imagine. So I kind of had to skip out on blog content last weekend, but we're back now with something that can help you with some of that sourdough discard that you may have on hand. And that's why I love this. Even though it's not leavened with just the sourdough, we have a little yeast to help us out to expedite this process. As you know, I like to make things faster than they can be sometimes. So, to give you a little info on this dish, we're going to have 2 sourdough flatbread crusts. So it serves 4. It's just so that you're not making a massive pizza or flatbread basically. And then there's this really delicious white bean spread with basil and garlic on top, some fresh toppings. You can kind of customize that how you want. Either way, it is super delicious and you don't have to turn on your oven to make it. Now, first things first, we're going to make our dough because that is going to need to proof for about an hour. The first thing that we need here is just unbleached all-purpose flour. You can also use 00 or 00 flour, which is the best pizza flour, but if you're not quite bougie like that, this flour works great. Bread flour also works, will get it a little crispier, has a higher gluten content. I digress. Unbleached all-purpose flour is great for this recipe, so we have that here. I have some of my sourdough discard. I would measure that by weight if you can, because it really just depends, like I should say the viscosity changes depending on how long it's been in the fridge, right? That's where I just store all of my sourdough starter. So the thinner it is, it's probably gonna weigh a little bit less. But anyways, try and go by weight if you can. If not, just go by the cup measurement. It's totally fine. We have some warm water to help the yeast activate, some olive oil, we have some onion powder and a little salt, and then some sugar for the yeast to feed on, and our instant yeast. You can also use active dry yeast. It's just a little bit of a different conversion, so I'm gonna link a tool in the description for you for that if you only have active dry yeast on hand. Now this first part is pretty easy. We're just going to be adding all of the ingredients into this flour. I'm going to make a little well here in the center. And I'm just going to actually add all the dry ingredients first. So the instant yeast, then like I said, the sugar. Then we have our salt and onion powder. You can also play around with the seasonings in this if you want to add like maybe dried oregano or something. Go wild. It's really not gonna be like a make or break for this recipe. It's pretty versatile. And now we have our sourdough starter. My starter has a lot of wheat flour in it, so that's why the color is pretty like tan. So that's gonna add a slightly different texture to this flatbread dough as opposed to pizza dough. Okay. And then here we want 2 tablespoons of olive oil, so I'm saving a bit of it for greasing the bowl after we knead the dough. And then lastly, we have our warm water. If you have a thermometer, you want it around like 105 degrees or 110 degrees. So first I'm going to stir this together with my spatula here. And then I'll start kneading by hand once most of that liquid is incorporated. And we're going to, you can do this in a stand mixer with a dough hook. It's definitely going to take a little less time because it's machine power, it's not man power. Either way works just fine. I kind of like the slightly therapeutic feeling of hand kneading dough like this. Get a little aggression out. Okay, so now let me move these things out of the way so I don't knock anything over. Get that. And then we're just going to start folding this over to make sure all of the flour gets incorporated into this. I'm going to scrape the bowl a little bit with this dough. And basically what we want is a dough ball that is like just a tad sticky, not too sticky. So see, this texture is pretty good in terms of wetness. It may get stickier as we go. You may need to add just a touch of flour. But basically we're doing all of our kneading here, and then we'll let the dough rest to proof. And, it'll expand, and also the gluten will develop, so you'll get this nice stretchy dough that will expand really wonderfully once it hits the grill. So you want to do this for a couple minutes. And honestly, I don't even think that I'm going to add any flour to this. So what I'm doing, if you can't see, is I'm just like folding it over once, pressing down, folding over, just like folding it in half each time. And you'll see what starts to happen is like that stretchy, that's the gluten that's developing in the dough as it's hydrating, as we're kneading it. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. So now, do a little drizzle of olive oil in here in this bowl. And just rub it around because the bottom of this really doesn't have much flour or anything to stick to. So I'm not even going to clean it out first. If yours ends up really sticky for some reason, you should probably add a little bit more flour and start kneading more. But this will be fine. And then we'll just there we go, coat that in the olive oil. And then I'm going to cover this with a towel really quick. Here we are. And I will put this, my kitchen is 80 degrees, so I don't really need to set this somewhere warmer to proof. If your kitchen is on the cooler side, I recommend just turning on your oven light and not turning on the oven, leaving it in there and letting it proof in there for about an hour, basically until it doubles in size. And then after it does that, we'll be splitting it into 2 pieces and then letting it sit for 10 minutes. During that 10 minutes is when we're going to work on the toppings because they are super easy and they really don't require much time or prep at all. So I will see y'all back in an hour. Okay, it's been an hour. Woo, look at that. Jiggly. Set this over here. Now it's time to divide this in half. And then we're just gonna let it sit for another 10 minutes while we whip up the white bean basil spread that goes on the flatbreads. So first, I'm going to flour my workspace a little bit, just a light dusting. And then turn this out. Woo, look at that. Wow, so yeasty. That is a positive adjective here. All right, and I'm just, I'm not even gonna weigh it. It's gonna be fine either way. I'm gonna divide that in half. You can use a knife or a pastry cutter like this. And then before we let it rest, what I'm going to do is kind of turn it into a ball. You see the gluten is really stretchy. There's quite a bit of wheat flour in that starter, so this may be slightly more dense than yours, depending on what you use to feed your sourdough starter. Ooh, okay. All right, now that we've turned it into a little ball there, just set this right here. Then we'll do the same to this one. And then I'll cover it again with that towel while we're working on this spread. I'm just kind of like tucking it under like that. Okay. Now leave that to rest. There we are. I don't want to knock this over. Now for our white bean spread, you will need a food processor. A blender may also work, but there's not a lot of liquid here, so don't quote me on that. It just depends on your blender. It's equipped with an S blade, very sharp. So first, I have a drained cup and a half of white beans. So it's basically your standard can of white beans that's drained. I actually just cooked these right now, and they're so good. In the Instant Pot. Didn't soak them first, which is kind of amazing. So great time saver in case you don't have any canned white beans on hand. Chickpeas may also work. It'll just have a slightly different flavor. And then we have about 1/4 cup of fresh basil. Toss that in there. Plus we have some nutritional yeast. Give it a slightly cheesy flavor or savory. Bump up the savoriness. I have 1 very large clove of garlic here. I'm going to add that in, or you can use 2 smaller cloves. Kind of just depends on how much you love garlic. I tried this recipe out yesterday and I made it with 2 large cloves, and it was kind of a lot even for me, but really just depends on how much you love garlic, like I said. Next we have some salt and pepper, and that's just to taste. And then we have a couple tablespoons of lemon juice. I'm just picking out these seeds so they don't clog up the citrus reamer right here. I have this crazy large pewter one that I got, I think, from like a garage sale or something. Maybe a thrift store. That makes more sense. Okay. So a couple tablespoons of that just to brighten it up a little bit. And then we'll blend it up. There we go. All right, let's check on this. What you may want to do is, depending on, I kind of like this thick like this. I feel like yesterday it was just a little thinner, but that's because I used the canned beans. Is you could just save a little bit of the liquid from your beans and add this in so that it spreads a little more easily. So I'm going to grab just a couple tablespoons of that aquafaba goodness that's in my Instant Pot and add it to this. Okay, there we go. And I think that'll be the perfect texture. Very nice. Oh, it wasn't hooked in the front. That's fun. Okay, there we go. That's like the perfect texture. You don't want it too runny, but you do want it to be able to spread. Yeah, that's super good. Okay, and this, ooh, that garlic, there it is. Once you put it on the pizza, or I guess the flatbread crust, once it's on the grill, it will take the edge off the raw garlic a little bit. And so that helps if you're a little scared of garlic. Plus, it pairs really nicely with the toppings I have here. I have some really thinly sliced red onion. I have some chopped kale, just fresh kale. I like this because it doesn't completely wilt when it's on the flatbread cooking. And then we got little cherry tomatoes. And these are nice because I like to put the bottom side down, so when they cook, they don't just saturate the flatbread with the liquid from the tomato. You can always take the seeds out if you're worried about that and you only have a larger tomato. But yeah, that's why I like little cherry or grape tomatoes for this. You just like that, and there's not too much water that really soaks in and makes it not ideal. But it gives a nice pop of sweetness once you're enjoying it. And then we just have a little salt and dried oregano for topping once we're done. I've tidied up some. I've started preheating the grill. We want it to be around like 500 degrees, 475. With a grill, it's not quite like an oven because as soon as you open the lid, the temperature is different. Once you put it back down, the temperature should be on top of the lid of the grill if you have any sort of modern grill. So yeah, you just want it really hot basically, because when we cook it, we're gonna be judging by what it looks like as opposed to exact times. So you'll have some wiggle room, but you just want it really hot, which is why it's very nice that we don't have to turn on our oven inside of our already hot kitchens, right? Yes, exactly. Okay, so it's been probably 10 minutes or so. I'm going to, again, flour this area down because now I'm going to roll out the dough, then do a little hand maneuvering. Nothing too crazy. Hopefully, it can help you with your flatbread or pizza making at home. So now I have this massive rolling pin, which I love so much. You can basically roll this out to whatever shape you want. I think I want this a little oblong, so I'm just going to roll it out that way. And then this way, it's a little bit more consistently thin than if you were to press it out with your hands. And then, like I said, we'll do some stretching with our hands separately. I just find that this works the best to not get any tears and things. I actually used to work at Whole Foods the first, I don't know, well, it was a few years ago. I had started blogging a few years before, and then it's not really the point, but I made a lot of pizza there. So we would usually run the dough through basically like a roller, and then we would stretch it out with our hands. So that's kind of the technique I'm using here, except that we've also made this dough. So now you're gonna ball up your hand kind of like this, so that your nails and nothing are poking out, and go around the inside and kind of turn it. And then this way, it stretches it out so that you get more mass on the outer crust. That creates your crust so that it's not completely the same density all the way through. There we go. You can see, at least from this side, it's getting thinner like right here. That might even be a little too thin. So I'm going to leave it there, stretch this out this way. And then once it starts puffing up, you'll see that it'll start puffing up more around the edges here. Get a nice little stretch. Oh no! If it tears, so dramatic. If it tears, just pinch it back together. It's really not a big deal. Okay, there we go. You see it likes to spring back because that gluten, right? Okay. And now I have a pizza peel here, but you can just use a baking sheet, whatever you have on hand, so that you have a flat surface to basically slide this flatbread dough onto the grill with. I just love these because they're awesome and it feels kind of fancy. So, this is a pretty hearty dough, honestly. There we go, like this. So we'll prep this one first, and then we'll go ahead and get this one because I don't want it to dry out too much while we're actually cooking this. Okay, forgive me for the poor lighting outside. It's a bit hot here in Vegas today. It was 109 and it still is like 104 outside or something. So I'm really glad that this grill is outside and not heating up my cooler house inside, albeit still slightly warm. Like I said, 80 degrees. So now the grill is at about 500 and some odd degrees. It's gonna get a little cooler as soon as we open it up. And now we'll just slide this on, woo, like that. And give it about 4, almost 5 minutes for the first cooking. The second side will be a little bit less with the toppings on it. We want some pretty obvious grill marks on the bottom and then a lot of bubbles on top so that it's not a super dense dough. It's nice and fluffy for this flatbread. Okay, let's check the bottom. Ooh, nice big bubbles. I think that looks pretty good. So now we will flip this stuff back onto the board and give it some toppings. Now it's time to top this. We're going to spread this basil white bean mixture on here. The crust alone smells so, so good. Okay. There we go. So good. Next are red onions. And you can really play around with the toppings to whatever you're into. Maybe add some olives or some artichoke hearts or something. Get a little bougie. Either way, it's going to taste really great. Now we have our tomatoes. You could always do sun-dried tomatoes as well. I think that's enough. I'll eat this one. Okay, and now with this kale, just gonna really cover this with it because it'll shrink quite a bit once it's on the grill. And I forgot to mention, I really love some vegan parm on this, but you don't really need it. I just add a little bit there, not too much vegan cheese, and it really has a nice saltiness. But since there's not a lot of cheese on here, I'm going to add a pinch of salt. Again, this is totally optional. And some dried oregano. You could also add dried basil if you really want to oomph up that basil flavor. And now it will go back on the grill. All right. A little push. There we go. And about 3 minutes is all you'll need. All right, let's check this out. Ooh, looks so good. Bottom looks good. Let's get this off of here. Ooh-wee. Could turn this off, let that air out. Can't wait to try this. Now that I am nice and sweaty from being outside, where it's very hot, I think it's time to try one of these flatbreads out. You see I've got both of them. So like I said, it can be 2 to 4 servings, kind of depends on your appetite, or if you're having it as an entree, or maybe if you want it as a starter or something because you're just doing tapas for dinner, whatever you want. Let's go ahead and try it out. I'm going to do a slightly unconventional long slice here. That way you have the crust lovers pieces on the ends, and you kind of very cutely, just kind of zigzag through this. Now, ooh! So you see that, you can see the little bubbles in the crust, a little puffy. There we go. Like a nice flatbread, not doughy and too thick. It'll be nice and fluffy. That little tomato in there, the sweetness. So good. Oh, I love this. And like I said earlier, I actually made this yesterday. So this one may be better. Somehow it may be a little bit better. Either way, so good. And like I said, you can play around with the toppings a bit. Maybe you want to add fresh basil at this point to oomph up the basil flavor that's in that white bean spread. Maybe you want to use arugula on top. I love arugula on flatbreads and pizza. I just don't have any arugula right now, truthfully. More of a spring green, if you know what I mean. So now I'm going to Continue to enjoy this flatbread. I hope that you found this very novel way to use some sourdough starter useful. And at the very least, delicious. Because, oh my, is it delicious. Now, you can find this whole recipe at veganyackatack.com. I'll include the link in the description for you, as well as that instant yeast to active dry yeast conversion that I was talking about earlier. And if you enjoyed this video and you like this recipe, go ahead and give me a thumbs up and subscribe. And I'll see you on the next video.